Think about the last time you left a conversation feeling like something was wrong, but you couldn't explain what. You replayed it, you questioned yourself, you wondered if you were too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. And somehow, by the end of it, you were apologizing. Not for anything you did, just for existing in a way that made them uncomfortable. If that feeling lives somewhere in your memory, recent or distant, what you're about to hear will explain something that nobody around you probably ever named. Because what happened to you wasn't confusion. It wasn't bad luck. It was a cycle. And it has been documented, studied, and repeated across millions of relationships in homes, workplaces, and friendships for as long as human psychology has been observed. Psychologists call it the idealize, devalue, discard cycle. It was first identified in clinical research on narcissistic personality disorder, but its presence extends far beyond clinical diagnoses. It shows up in romantic relationships, in family dynamics, in friendships, and in professional environments. The cycle has three distinct phases. Each one serves a specific psychological function for the person running it, and each one produces a predictable, measurable effect on the person on the receiving end. You didn't imagine the warmth at the beginning. You didn't imagine the cruelty in the middle. And you didn't imagine how completely disposable you felt at the end. All three phases were real, and all three were deliberate. Here is what most people conclude after experiencing the cycle: that they were naive, that they should have seen it coming, that something about them invited it. That conclusion is not just wrong, it is precisely what the cycle is designed to produce. Research on coercive control patterns consistently shows that the people most likely to be targeted are not the most vulnerable in the traditional sense. They are often the most emotionally intelligent, the most empathetic, the most willing to give the benefit of the doubt. Those are not weaknesses. They are the qualities someone decided to use. The failure here was not yours. It begins with intensity. They make you feel like the most interesting, most understood, most seen person in the room. Psychologists call this love bombing, a concentrated period of affection, attention, and validation that moves faster than any healthy relationship naturally would. Research published in the Journal of Personality Disorders identifies love bombing as a deliberate, if sometimes unconscious, strategy to create rapid emotional dependency. The goal is not to make you happy. The goal is to make you need them. And it works, because the human brain responds to intermittent, intense positive reinforcement the same way it responds to any reward system. It bonds, it attaches, it begins to organize itself around maintaining access to that feeling. By the time the second phase begins, you are already invested in a version of them that was constructed specifically for you. Phase 2, devaluation. The warmth doesn't disappear overnight, it erodes. Small criticisms, subtle dismissals, moments where you feel like you've done something wrong, but you're not sure what. They become harder to reach, less interested, occasionally cold in a way that makes the moments of warmth feel like a reward you have to earn. This is not random emotional instability. Psychologist Jennifer Freyd's research on betrayal trauma demonstrates that this kind of inconsistency, warmth followed by withdrawal, closeness followed by distance, produces a specific psychological state in the person experiencing it: hypervigilance, anxiety, a constant low-level monitoring of the other person's mood. You become focused on them, not because you are weak, because your nervous system has been trained to treat their emotional state as a signal it needs to track. The devaluation phase doesn't just make you feel bad, it makes you work harder to get back to how good the beginning felt. That is its function. Phase 3. discard. And then, often without warning, it ends. Not always dramatically. Sometimes it's a slow fade. Sometimes it's a sudden replacement, a new person receiving the same intensity you once did. Sometimes it's simply indifference where there was once intimacy. What makes the discard phase particularly damaging is not the ending itself, it is the cognitive aftermath. Because your brain, which has been conditioned over months or years to seek their approval, to monitor their moods, to try harder, does not simply stop when the relationship does. Neuroscientific research on social rejection shows that the same neural pathways activated by physical pain are activated when we experience social disconnection. The loss of an attachment figure, even one who caused harm, registers in the brain as a genuine threat to survival. This is why you couldn't simply decide to move on. The grief wasn't irrational. The obsession wasn't weakness. Your brain was responding to the loss of something it had been neurologically conditioned to depend on. If you experienced this cycle, some of these will be familiar. You found yourself apologizing for reactions that were completely reasonable. You spent significant mental energy trying to figure out what you did wrong, even when you knew, somewhere, that you hadn't done anything. The good periods felt disproportionately good, almost euphoric, in a way that normal relationships don't quite replicate. You made yourself smaller, quieter, more agreeable, not because you wanted to, but because keeping the peace felt safer than the alternative. You told yourself things would go back to how they were at the beginning, and sometimes, briefly, they did, which made you stay. When it ended, or when you ended it, you felt grief that people around you couldn't fully understand, because from the outside, the relationship looked like something you should be relieved to be free of. But relief wasn't what you felt. If more than two of those resonated, you weren't in a difficult relationship, you were in a cycle, and the difference matters, because one can be worked through, and the other needs to be recognized for exactly what it is. Here is what changes now that you can see it clearly. The cycle only works in the dark. It depends on you believing that your reactions were the problem, that if you had just been better, calmer, less sensitive, more patient, it would have been different. It wouldn't have. Because the cycle isn't a response to who you are. It's a structure that runs independent of you. Naming it doesn't erase what happened, but it does mean it cannot operate on you the same way again. Drop a comment below. Was it the beginning that was hardest to let go of, or the version of yourself you became trying to hold it together?